First off, before we bring Cliff in, because what we're going to do in the first hour is, Bill, you're going to be going over Cliff's latest report, Have Past Human, in the first hour. And in the second hour, we're going to be talking about what's not in that report, which is all of the different disinformation that's surrounding Elenin. Now, before we kick the show, I kind of want to make a where are we at assessment, because I'm getting a lot of email from folks, and everyone's been waiting for this period of time when Elenin is in an inferior conjunction, which means it's between us and the sun, and the alignment has got folks concerned. In our video, what we said is that we were concerned about there being a solar event associated with this period of time. Now, what we do have right now is my wife, Yelena, has been following the Russian media on this, and before it is even translated into English, it takes another day or so for that. And what Leonid Elenin is now reporting in Russia is that he is not able to see Comet Elenin in SOHO imagery. But then again, there's a lot of things we don't see in SOHO imagery, so that's neither here nor there. Meanwhile, in terms of solar interaction, I think there's a strong case for the electric universe now, because we have had this long period of solar quiescence. It's like, where's the sunspots, right? And what we have now is sunspot 1302. This thing is so huge that it is visible to the naked eye when people are seeing the sun, like at sunset or sunrise. I'm getting pictures from people, and you're even seeing these naked eye observation photos on spaceweather.com. So it looks like the mainstream sites have finally caught up with us. That's different for a change. Now, the other thing is that we have these, the CME, this storm. It was a pretty strong storm. Now, yesterday, it was impressive for me. My wife is very supportive of my work, but she's the ultimate cynic, skeptic. And it's good. Kind of gives me a check and balance. But yesterday, we're going about, and we live in a coastal area right now. The weather is very pleasant in the 70s, low 70s. And the sun is usually, a nice warm glow on the face. Well, the best way to describe the way the sun has been hitting us here is, particularly yesterday, is it's like, imagine you've gone to the beach and you got a really bad sunburn, and so you suffer through it that night, and the next day you go right back out on the beach without tanning lotion or an umbrella or a shirt or anything, and you just sit in the sun with this really bad sunburn. And that was really, a good way to describe the discomfort and that we were having. It was enough that my wife actually, at one point, took an intentional turn, took a different route, so that she could get us, out of the direct sunlight falling on her side of the car. Today, we're having, it's not as pronounced as yesterday, but it's still there. We were out today, and while this is going on, I'm sitting here and I am thinking about the other things we're seeing. Now, there's a lot of reports, and there's new reports coming in today of bolides, blue-green bolides, and they are in these slow, uncertain descents. So it's strange. It's not where they're like objects that are coming in from space that are in a very steep angle of attack, and they just come in like a bullet. Wham! All right? We're seeing this stuff at high altitude, and it's slow. It's meandering, zigzagging back forth, and then falling. And it's blue-green. Well, we already know we've got space junk falling. We just had this bus-sized observatory that fell out of low Earth orbit. But I think there's a lot more stuff that's falling out of low Earth orbit, and they're not talking about it because, they don't want to talk about it. But these reports are coming in from around the world. They're not being reported in our mainstream media. But again, bolides, these odd fireballs in the sky with this shallow angle of attack and wavering. Well, where does the blue come from? You've got space junk. It is loaded with copper. Burn copper, you get blue-green. Okay? So, and plus whatever other exotic metals that they have in the space junk as it's falling. So I'm seeing all of this stuff, and I'm thinking, all right, at one point it's just like, let's just see what we see, and I'm tired of talking about it. I'm tired of the conjecture and all of the debate, and nobody being able to get clarity on this thing. And, as a researcher, Bill, let me ask you, at some point you go, how many people really give a damn?
I don't know. It's hard to say. There's millions of us around the world that are watching this sort of stuff, both with the WebBot reports and all the other information that's coming out, as well as what we talk about. Mm-hmm. But I think there may be literally billions of people around the world that just aren't discussing it, but they're paying attention to it.
Well, I had a moment today where I actually saw an example of that. All right? Out with the wife again. And I figured, okay, she wants to go to the farmer's market. I'm going, well, let's see what the sun feels like. People were suffering at the market. The sun was still, it was painful to stand out in the sun. You saw people moving the shade as fast as they could, saw all of the merchants, whatever little shade that they could get out of their awnings, they were under that shade. All right. Nobody wanted to be in the sun because it was still hot on the skin, uncomfortably hot on the skin. And I'm buying some lovely organic tomatoes from this nice little, there's a couple, and this woman is there with her sister and her husband, and they're selling organic stuff from their little farm out in the county. And and she was putting ice on the neck of her sister because her sister was really getting heated up. And this is really odd because why is she putting ice on her neck at 72 degrees out? Yeah, the sun's a little toasty. And it said, well, it's this X-ray storms. And then she turns around and looks at me. Yeah, she said, X-ray storms, this big honking sunspots. We got satellites falling out of the sky. There's all kinds of crap happening, plus meteors. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking to myself, what's this? What am I looking at? This is a 20-something organic farmer from out in the backhoe of the county I live in. Got a nice little farm out there. How would she know about all of these things coming together unless she's following it? And that was when I had a moment of an epiphany as to why there's been so much disinformation. And in the second hour, I'll begin by sharing that epiphany. But with that set up, first off, folks, what I want to say to you is I don't want to come on tonight and speculate or dive into conjecture about what is happening or what's happening. All I want to say is, to me, I don't hear the fat lady singing until the end of November. That's it. I want to see us get through that dust tail, and then after that, I can't see anything else happening. Even with our forecast, assuming Elenin pops up again, but again, early November when we transit the dust tail, I'm still deeply worried about that. And as far as it goes for what's happened so far, frankly, it doesn't match exactly with any of the predictions I've seen from scientists or ourselves or anyone else. But one thing is very clear. In my mind, there is a solar connection between Elenin and Earth, because we're getting slammed with storms from a sun that hasn't had sunspots. 1302 is huge, many times the size of Jupiter, and if this thing merges up with the other two sunspots that are nearby, oh, hell, Katie barred the door. That's it. We're in deep poodoo. So with that, what I am going to do in the first hour is we're going to have a role reversal here. And Bill is going to do the interview in the first hour with our guest Cliff and introduce the WebBot project and get into the report. And then in the second hour, then I'm going to step back in. And I think it's going to be fun. So in the meantime, I'll see you guys out in the chat room. Be nice. Okay, Bill, is yours.
Okay, thank you, Marshall. Ladies and gentlemen, I have the great privilege on the History Channel. His reports have been mentioned. He is the author of the older Alta reports, and he is the author of the current WebBot reports. I present to you the Yow Radio audience, Mr. Cliff High. Cliff, how you doing tonight?
Doing pretty good. Thank you very much.
Excellent. And Cliff and I share one great thing in common. And it's not an understanding of the WebBot report. It's not anything spiritual or anything personal. It is our love of pie. And I love mincemeat pie. How about you, Cliff?
It's not one of my favorites. It's okay. I'm more of a fruit or a squash pie kind of a guy. So my favorite's actually, I think, Marion Berry, followed very closely by O. Henry Peach.
Oh, excellent. Excellent.
Yeah, I actually happen to have some O. Henrys down there. They're going to go into a pie tomorrow. So
that sounds good. Now, the WebBot report, for those of you that have never actually seen one in person, Cliff takes and gathers information from across the internet and brings that information in and deciphers it, I guess you could say. And the title of these things is as follows: Asymmetric Language Trend Analysis, Interpretation, and Predictions for 2011-2012. And that sounds like a mouthful, but I'm going to go ahead and let Cliff explain exactly what happens when he prepares these WebBot reports. So, Cliff, take it away and give us a brief explanation of what the heck the WebBot is.
Sure. Let's throw in brief on that. Yeah. I can explain it thoroughly such that everybody would understand it, but it's going to take more than 35 words. So what I'll do is sketch broadly the operation of it. And basically we operate on the theory that all humans are psychic. Most of them don't know it, and that the future can be is continually sending out waves ahead of its manifestation. Those waves are picked up by humans. They don't know they're picking it up, and it causes them to use different words than they would otherwise if absent that particular future impetus. So the future basically impinges on our consciousness in such a way as to change how we use language in our daily interaction. And I can get into the details, but it's not really pertinent. And basically what we do is we read vast quantities of public information. We don't read email. We don't read chat rooms as a rule. Sometimes we stumble into them, but as a rule we don't hunt them out or anything. And we take all this language and coagulate it down into the archetypes that are represented by the words. And then using a proprietary method, we extract from those archetypes sort of a dark view of that future that is impinging on our consciousness collectively at that time. And the process was initially begun in 1993 when I had a few insights and started the software programming. It took me until 97 to write all the code necessary. Actually, the initial part, I was writing code for another 5 years after that. But then I did my first run in 97, and since then we've been off and going. Sort of makes sense?
I believe that makes perfect sense for the layperson, because I am, in fact, believe it or not, a layperson. And that's a perfect answer. I think that'll give our audience a good clue as to what the WebBot is all about. And
right.
The first question,
it's not particularly the computers itself. Basically, my continual point in all of this is that it's the underlying mass populace that's psychic, and the computer is merely the tool that we use to filter through it all.
Right.
So first question.
First question is, over the last several reports. I seem to recall there is a precipitous drop in the long-term WebBot returns, like the internet or humans cease to exist for a while. And I'm looking at page 3 and 4 of the latest report, and it looks like there's a building in the data sets that seem to coincide with these 2012 events. And it seems like the view of the WebBot's model space predictions move like forward into the future predictions, specifically 2012, and you were seeing a data hole in 2012, and then it comes back online in 2013. Is that still the case? Are you still seeing that data hole?
That's sort of a good description. What you need to understand is that the data hole that we'd perceived in 2003 was centered around 2012. As we got into doing our reports in 2005, the data hole was still in 2012, but we were closer to it. And as now that we're very close to the 2012, the data hole is still there, but it's because we're closer to it, it's ever so much larger. And so our issue at the moment is trying to see around it or through it, so to speak, to get at some of the longer-term data behind it. But basically your description is quite correct. We have a data hole or a hard wall or a hard stop or something that occurs in 2012. Our operating theory at the moment is that there is an emotional wave or an emotional change of great magnitude that occurs to the species as a whole in 2012 that may or may not be accompanied by internet failure on a mass scale or internet change on a mass scale such that we can no longer work. In either case, the data hole appears to be a hard stop for us. We think that we're working out some of the parameters on getting some view around it. If we are correct in our operating theory, then once we're through 2012, presumably the emotional impact of whatever it is that's going to occur, one event or many events should be over, and then we could maybe get back to work as usual if the internet was still functioning.
Yeah, guys, can I jump in for a sec? Because I heard this.
Yeah, sure.
Because I have a question. Geez, hey, it's my show, so I can break in, right? Everybody wish they could. I am hearing this same thing from remote viewers, professionals who are saying when they start projecting and trying to do remote viewing in the 2012 timeframe, they hit a brick wall. They can't see anything.
And
so
it would not surprise me because basically they're delving into that far end of the psychic technology as well, whereas I aggregate it from vast quantities of people that leak it out unknowingly. They're specifically tuning in on it as basically a highly charged antenna. So this is not surprising at all. I don't know that there's an explanation for it that at this point is much more than speculation. What I do know is that the particulate level of granularity that we used to enjoy within our data sets degraded over time at a steady rate from 2003 until about 2009, and then accelerated that rate, and it has remained steady, and it has accelerated again in early 2011. So the rate of acceleration, the rate of change itself is speeding up. And I suspect it's kind of like rolling downhill strapped to a boulder. As that boulder gets moving, you're going to feel it.
With that, I'll roll out of your way and hand it back to Bill. Thanks, fellas.
Yep, not a problem, Marshall. We have a question from the chat room, Cliff, from a Lawrence Bosek, or Bosek. I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name. And he wants me to ask you about George Yours, I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name.
Yeah.
Okay, he had a post on Monday that was talking about a possible upcoming seismic event regarding the Canary Islands of La Palma. Do you have any information about it? Any thoughts on that?
Well, there's all kinds of public information that anybody can find out about it. Go and look at what the government's doing, the evacuations, the change in the nature of the island structure. It appears to be very active. There have been hundreds and hundreds of earthquakes in the, maybe even thousands by this point in the last few weeks. This is not surprising. It is predictable that this event will occur as part of the expanding of the planet. The planet is going to expand in direct proportion to the amount of energy that's unleashed into it through the high energy particles that will be pouring out of the sun and are pouring out of the sun and have been pouring out of the sun and were talked about by Marshall earlier, pouring through the poor people in the market. And those high energy particles, some portion of them go into the inner part of the Earth that creates new matter there in the reverse of the E equals MC squared equation. And the new matter must force itself out. So, and if you look at these places, La Palma, it was in the process of degrading and sort of slowly stopped. And now the process that started that degradation so many thousands of years ago is speeding back up again. So we can expect it to go. Our issues at the moment are the following. Basically, we know that there's been some serious movement in what we call the entrenched powers, or the powers that were, the elites or elites as they like to think of themselves. These people are moving around in ways they have not in the past. And this is like got the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. Because when these people go into hidey holes, it's time to pay attention. And there's also been vast quantities of movements of money making particular bets against market activity relative to the immediate future, October. So given that and given the data that we've got, my supposition is that there is an order of probability that I'm not able to put a number on in any meaningful sense, but there is a probability, not a possibility, but a probability that a major earthquake event within the United States, within the continental United States, would also trigger the La Palma event, simply because it's also showing that same kind of pressure from the forces that are causing the expansion, as we're also seeing in some areas of the deep Pacific, including Vanuatu and the Marshall Islands. So the effect there is pretty much the same. I'm, in fact, waiting that event. Now, does that mean 2,000-foot high waves of water? I dispute that. As a trained oceanographer, I would dispute that you could physically get a 2,000-foot high wall of water to crawl up the Atlantic coast. The continental shelf wouldn't support it. At most, you'd be talking maybe double-size or triple-size ordinary tsunamis, which at most would be on the order of perhaps 200 feet, and it would only go in very shortly before it would lose most of that mass. So the idea of a 2,000-foot high wall of water rolling over a third of the United States is quite bogus. The physical nature of the ocean and how these waves are generated preclude that. But I am indeed very concerned about that sort of event, a La Palma crumbling.
Okay. That kind of actually segues pretty good into the next question and topic that I wanted to discuss, which is kind of hits home, real close to home for me, because we're here in southeast Michigan. And in the latest report, you had an entire section on ice here in the northern hemisphere, I guess, and it looks like, from what I'm reading, it's going to cover the entire northern hemisphere, like a really, really bad winter, a sort of day after tomorrow scenario or something like that?
No, I don't see it that way, because the day after tomorrow scenario was basically from a supergiant storm kind of condition. What we're looking at here is the exact reverse of that. We're looking at the gigantic movement of an ice age showing up and just dipping its little toe out there and showing us that little toe this year. But once the little toe is planted, the foot is not moving, so the rest of the ice age will be moving in relatively shortly. You have to understand that not only do we have the solar maximums that are occurring and then the 13,000-year solar half cycle of the precession, the end of the 26,000-year solar cycle of the precession, we also are near the, near the peak of a 100,000-year cycle that has always coincided with ice ages. And ice ages are good things. They're not to be feared. They're a nasty inconvenience for us little fleas on the planet, but they save the planet from going into a Venus-like condition because they make the oceans become cold, and all the crud basically falls to the bottom, and then the oceans are pure again, and life can flourish. Without that, the pollution and the heat damage that has been done over these past millennia are going to make the oceans a terrible thing to be around, and that will in turn kill off most of the planet. So ice ages are good things, and you will see it this year. in a way that will be relatively undeniable by June of next year. In other words, I would expect June of next year to have reports of snow.
So you're talking like the mini ice age of the what was it?
The Maunder minimum or one of those.
Yeah.
No, it may be much more severe than that. The issue is you have to look at things in an extremely broad scale. And so if you look at where we are within that 100,000-year cycle, there's also a 6.2 million-year cycle, a 62 million-year cycle. And unfortunately for us, that 62 million-year cycle, we're about to the same position, the maximal position that the Earth reaches in this particular sinusoidal wave as it goes around through the galaxy. Every 62 million years, we reach a particular peak. And this is when the dinosaurs ate it, for instance, right? And we lost all the dinosaurs, they say, 63 million years ago. Now, the fact that we're at and near that same spot means that there's going to be a fundamental change in the nature of the planet and all of the beasts that live on it. And so this ice age that we're going to see, I doubt would be considered to be a minimum. I think it'll be just like a regular kind of an ice age.
So a little bit more
civilization destroying if we don't adapt. Correct.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we're gonna get this weird thing. The last time we went through one of these cycles on a quarter cycle of it, we lost all of the large mammals in the northern hemisphere, and the giant sloths left us in South America and so on. So all of the saber-toothed critters, if you will, were the ones that left in the last end of this cycle. So I expect that we'll lose a lot of the large predators, that they will simply go extinct. On the other hand, we're also in a time of great mutation, so we'll get new species arising, some of which are going to be probably quite terrible to behold because the conditions at the moment, what with all of the mutagens from the sun and the high-energy particles and all of this, it's going to be really a stew.
You think the radiation from Fukushima will have any effect on those mutations, or is that too much in the background?
I'm certain it will because we're seeing it over here, and I can, I don't turn on the Geiger counter anymore because it's too depressing to listen to all the stuff blowing over us. But the amount of radiation that we're getting at another level is so much more powerful that any effect that Fukushima would have would be relatively minor.
Okay.
What
about the southern hemisphere? Are they going to be seeing the same thing?
I'm sorry, what?
The southern hemisphere, are they going to be seeing the same thing as we are, or is it just going to be confined to the northern?
No, the Fukushima radiation is confined to the northern. It likely will take 50 to 60 years to reach a dispersion pattern where it's ubiquitously spread across the planet. But it's confined up here for a number of decades. But that's not going to be the issue. The issue, as I say, is solar radiation or unknown energies from space. Because we don't even have a clue. We can barely sniff out the electromagnetic spectrum and just know that there's stuff on either side of it we can't even see. And if the electromagnetic spectrum in the form of even visible light from the sun is changed from yellow to this intense white that is incredibly burning with high-energy actinic rays and extremely high ultraviolet, in fact, a whole new category of ultraviolet is emerging. Well, we can imagine that those kind of changes are taking place in the other ends of the energy spectrum that we have no clue about, and thus our entire molecular substrate upon which our whole planet is based is in a state of flux. And it's going to be a very interesting couple of years, which, as you say, will include an ice age, and it probably won't be a good winter.
Probably not, by the sounds of things. I guess I better get my snowblower tuned up for this winter. And for next summer.
Okay, what we get is, for next summer it would probably be more likely. What we get in our data is that we get various different kinds of archetypes. And some of the archetypes we have a tendency to, put more faith in simply because of the nature of the archetype. So anything showing up with, for instance, body part references, especially human body part references, is a very high archetype because humans are very fond of their bodies and that they elevate that archetype way up in their consciousness. Basically, is how I think about it, right? And so in our ice thing, that is a very primal archetype because it's way up there with weather, but it's not one of the, I need to get into the linguistic nuances of it for a second, but when the data set came up, the top of that data set was ice. There was no vagueness to it at all. It was very clear. It was hard-edged. There was no, grackle or, big snowstorm or any kind of ambiguity whatsoever, and that is relatively rare. We got that with the Sumatran tsunami when we saw 300,000 people dead, and at the same time we also had another data set that said country driven back to a previous age. And in that same level of emotional summation values, we now have ice for this coming winter. So, if you can get in that extra few cords of wood or whatever, it probably will serve you well.
Yeah. Folks, you need to listen to what he just said. That's he's getting the same responses that they did for the tsunami. The same responses about this ice. That's,
the same emotional sums, correct.
Yeah, the same emotional sums. That's extremely important. You need to listen to that. Now, this really, really ties in with the next question that I have, and that's about the social changes that we're seeing in the WebBot report. And the two that I particularly want to talk about, and I think we chatted about this last night, is the first one is, and I'm going to read right from the report. It says, the details go into a situation in which the elder's grandparents go to the rescue of the at-risk children and are forced by the entrenched powers into what amounts to a skirmish with the up-and-coming, soon-to-be pop on the street near you Second American Revolution. And I want to know if that ties into the temporal marker that was in the report about subdivisions being raised in the U.S. as terrorist control measures, and also the mention of a videographer that will be decapitated for videotaping something.
Yeah, now that particular set, I hate writing stuff like that, of course. I just...
Well, it's spooky, but people got to know about it.
That's correct. But the thing is, at some level, I don't believe that it can be changed when it hits the immediacy values. But you'd have to understand the complete nature of how we've categorized the data that comes on in. But basically, by the time it comes on up to slap you in the face, it's a little too late to get a warning out such that an individual's life might be spared or whatever. However, we could be wrong. That's what my saving grace is, that we're wrong about probably half the time in the specifics, but that's still twice as good as chance would allow. Now, in this case, though, that set about the videographer was within the netting of the populace by the entrenched powers. Now they were going to use nets and just swoop people into compounds and hustle them off. And that broader set, we're seeing some of it being fulfilled now with the protesters in New York and Los Angeles and Chicago being met by this new tactic of the now militarized police, where they literally bring out these road barrier nets that have been reinforced with 1/4 inch vinyl wrapped steel wire and corral people. Now, in the case of New York, there was the infamous video of the supervisor going on out there and spraying the chemicals in the face of all of these, 20-something kids who are merely out there voicing, let's not forget that, their displeasure with having to spend the rest of their lives as wage slaves to pay off the TARP and all the other bailouts. That's their crime, by the way, is that they don't want to be a slave the rest of their lives to the banksters, and they're basically out there announcing their annoyance. And that level of the fence rounding up is showing up. So we know that set is active. We suspect that we still have yet more incidents of the netting, and one of those in the descriptor set will be videotaped, and there will be some accident, some overreaction, some set of circumstances that allow this poor videographer, who himself is being videoed, to meet with a very untimely end and get his head cut off, basically. We don't know the details of it. I hope it doesn't turn out that way, and I hope it's, it almost happened. There was some discussion of it, because bear in mind that is a saving component of our work. We, in our work, can't tell the difference between people in the future discussing an event or the event itself being discussed in reports in the paper and so on. And so if people are saying, oh yeah, let's all go to this good concert, and then the concert never happened, but there was no mention of it not happening, we would still only pick up the let's go to the good concert language and not see the other other side of it. Make sense?
Yes, that I understand that. Hopefully the audience can
it as well. It gets really involved and tedious beyond I don't even like discussing that. But let's get back to the question about the subdivisions. We've had a number of years ago, we've had this postulate by George Ure. He's an associate of ours. He had this postulate that makes a lot of sense, and the postulate is that the longer we see something in our data before it actually materializes, the larger the impact it's going to have on the social body at that time. And I think his postulate is good, and it's stood the test of these last 10 years. And we saw that stuff, it's pertinent because we saw the data about the razing, the destruction of these subdivisions way back in 2003 without really understanding what was going on because, of course, back then the housing boom was just really getting rolling then and had yet to crash 4 or 5 years later. And so that was a particularly powerful subset that is now maturing and had been pegged even in 2003 as showing up about this time frame. That is to say the end of 2011 and into the early part of 2012. Now, part of the rationale that the powers that be will use for destroying all these subdivisions is anti-terrorism measures, various different ones, not a specific story, but an umbrella of various different anti-terrorism measures. But basically what they're trying to do is to have a huge amount of destruction so that they can then have a construction industry again and try and start the whole thing going. It won't work because of a bunch of other events that intrude, but nonetheless we'll have those the subdivisions being run over by whole crews. And in a sense, it's kind of like a throwback to the 30s when they came up with the idea of the construction corps in order to put all these millions of people to work. Here it'll be the destruction corps in order to put millions of people to work because there just will be no other opportunities for these individuals. And it looks to be a quasi militarized effort, at least being run by the Corps of Engineers, and not haphazard. These guys are going to go through, they're going to get every scrap of copper, salvage light bulbs, all different kinds of stuff. So they're not just destroying them, they're basically mining them for resources along the way.
Okay. That brings me to the next question, which I believe also ties in with that, and this is what I took from the report, and you correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just going to give you a few of the headlines that I picked up from this, and I think they tie together, but you tell me whether or not they do. You were seeing a new Kent State type of event. We're seeing a market crash that takes months, commodities deflating, prices deflating, United States hyperinflation for a brief period, and riots followed by some type of a revolution. Does any of that tie in with this?
Yeah, actually it does. I mean, as a temporal marker, we're in the flow of this global evolution, renaissance, whatever, okay? It really limits it to call it a revolution because that actually brings up the context of violence and all this sort of thing. And the effects of whatever it is that are hitting the species at the moment are much broader than that. But the raising of the subdivisions will be about a third of the way, two-thirds of the way really, through the economic component, and about a third of the way through the social degradation in terms of how we plot the timeline within our model space. So actually what I expect to occur is a series of events beginning in October, our Shocktober month, as the markets go basically start becoming irrelevant. Then there's going to be a bunch of currency woes and issues that are going to hit us in November. They're going to set us up for an event of some kind in early December. Not a major event, but a definitive shift that will tell everybody we've clearly shifted. And then in January, February, and March, we're in a building tension period. Through that building tension period, you'll see much of the language that you've just discussed manifest, and because it'll be that probably the 5th or 6th month of, quote, the market crash, if you start timing the market crash from October of this year as opposed from October of 2008 or even to the year 2000. It's all one long process. So it's just where you want to stick your markers. But that's going to go on over these next few months. And we're going to be in building tension language from November all the way through to March. We haven't had one of these in a long time. And then in March we go into release language. And the release language will continue all the way through 2012, the rest of 2012 and into 2013. In fact, we don't show any end of the release language. We just run into this hard stop and can't do calculations of that nature beyond that at this stage. So the market crash, though, probably, there's bets on it as to whether it'll be the 7th of October or the 11th. You know, the powers that be kind of like crashing things on Tuesday. So it probably will be 11, and that's 11, 11, 11. So, you know, they like numbers like that.
Yeah. That brings us to the next wonderful topic of the private security forces, the powers that be, what do they call that? What you were calling that, the Safe Roads Initiative in the report?
Yeah. And
I think that ties in to the past few subjects that we were talking about here.
Yeah, we're at a period in which the actions of individuals have to really be seen as they all come together and aggregate, because we are at one of those points in history where the flavor of the time will dictate mass actions, just as there was a distinct flavor of the time in the French Revolution, and the people that lived through it wrote about it and tried to express that. We're going to be in that same sort of situation as we go forward here. Part of this flavor of the time is the reaction of the entrenched powers as, A, they realize they are now entrenched, that's why I've changed my language in talking about these guys, is because that's what they are. They're entrenched. We're all out there. We're all awake now, waking up. We know it. We're all pointing at them, and they're all starting to get into little hidey holes and bunkers because they can't stand the light of day. And they must maintain a level of corruption, and that corruption can only be hidden by being occulted and hidden. I mean, it can only operate by being hidden. And so once it's no longer hidden, then they are the entrenched powers. They have power now, but the only way they can maintain it is to be out in the open and be brutal about it. That's where we get into these private security forces, because to a certain extent, they're going to attempt, that is to say, the entrenched powers, are going to attempt to use the private security forces to maintain this illusion that we have a rational operating political system with truth, justice for all, that kind of thing, when in fact anything other than that is now the case. Because the powers that be will be able to say, oh, no, it wasn't us. It was just a rogue element of Xi or whatever Blackwater will be calling itself by that time, Xing or whatever. And they'll be able to distance themselves and still maintain this illusion and have courts and still have it all operate, as opposed to what they're really being forced to do, which is to confront having to come out into the open and to decide how they're going to deal with the rest of us. Are they going to attempt to be brutal dictators and force it down our throats, or are they going to, acquiesce to the changing nature of the time, which gets us back to that whole flavor of time thing. We've shifted out of the age of Pisces, in which there were the beginning of organized everything, civilization as we know it, into the age of Aquarius. And in Aquarius, it's the sovereign individual who's self-determining, self-actualizing, self-educating, not a member of a school of a fish, but rather an individual, sovereign, exploring universe on their own. Powers that be don't like that, and they're going to use those private security forces very brutally over these coming months. But they won't have any hesitation, by the way. We have to understand war is out there. It hasn't been openly declared unless you care to open your eyes up and look.
That's, I'd have to say, that's pretty disturbing.
It's disturbing to me. But
yeah.
Look, you've got, Rumsfeld and Cheney and these kind of people personally authorizing the torture of American citizens not on American soil. And so all they have to do is get you off American soil, and, oh, yeah, it's legit. They can torture you, All they have to do is reclassify you, label you no longer as a citizen. You won't find that word used much anymore. And it'll be, potential terrorist or any of these other, homemade radical or whatever else, the language they're going to start popping up with. And it's going to be very disturbing because they're being forced into a corner. with just all the mass of people that are becoming awake to what's going on and all of the other issues. You know, it's awful hard to keep everybody in a trance when the TV is nothing but bad news, and you know, the food is bad, the economy is bad, no one's working. You know, the despair starts setting in, and your gut starts grumbling, and you look around and you start wondering, why is this the way it is? And as soon as you start asking that why question, you start stumbling into places like mine, and the next thing you know, you're a radical, aware human.
Yeah, hopefully the nearly 400 people in our chat room are becoming aware by listening to this conversation, and I certainly hope they are, because this is what I believe to be very important information. And I saw another one of the headlines that I picked out of the report, and again, correct me if I've completely misread this, is that anyone over the age of, say, between 47 and 50 who is currently unemployed will probably never work again, and the government's going to realize this in the near term.
The government already knows it. They're going to get to the point where they're going to have to acknowledge it to those individuals in the near term. And that's why we get that.
What can they do?
What can who do? The government,
well,
you mean?
Any of us. I mean, the citizens or the government.
Well, here's the thing. Okay, you have to change the context. Let me put it out to you very clearly. The United States dollar will die. No currency has ever lived forever. As soon as the dollar dies, it goes away. All of the billions of dollars that were out there in circulation will be gone, and yet nothing will have changed. We would still have all the resources on the planet, we just wouldn't have dollars. We'd still have all the rhododendrons, we'd still have all of the blackberry bushes, we'd still have all of the rocket fuel. Nothing would have changed. So, you're unemployed. Well, that means that you do not have someone who is in a position to hunt up work for you and give you money to compensate you for that work. So at that level, get off your butt, decide you're going to be your own boss, figure out what you can do in a harmonious, cooperative way, because that's always better than competition, and get you there faster, and then go on out and be harmonious and cooperate and provide value to universe. I swear to you that if you provide value to universe, universe shall compensate you, and you just don't have to worry about it after that. You won't have a job, but you'll have work, and that's much more meaningful. I haven't had a job for ages, but I have work, and that's much more meaningful. And universe cooperates, and it provides, you know, sufficiency. Nobody needs to be a multimillionaire and drive around in these mega yachts. You know, no one needs 5 cars, or, you know, you need sufficiency. We need to follow that maxim of everybody needs to learn to enjoy to live simply, such that others can simply live. And then the mass collection of humanity can at that point say, okay, we're strong, we're lean, we're mean, we're ready to go. And then space is our oyster. And we'll go on out and we'll just, you know, tear the universe a new one and reorganize things in a nice cooperative way and get rid of all of the obstacles that have been bothering us. But we've got to do it from our core outwards. I keep saying this, and it's, you know, it's interesting because like 8% of the populace likes to exercise. They like to exercise. Another 4 to 5% will exercise. They just don't like it as much. But that basically is it. And the problem is that everyone could be in that category. They all have the same thing that everybody else does that likes to exercise and keep fit, etc. The only thing that they're not doing is they're not doing the exercise itself. And if you just examine some of the concepts in the language, you can see how easy it is to overcome a lot of these things, because what is it that's keeping you from doing the exercise or bettering yourself in any other way, including, you know, finding your destiny and universe or going on out and conquering that planet or whatever? The only obstacle that is preventing any of this exists within you, and it's the easiest thing in the world to remove.
And that is another point good point for the audience to remember, and a lot of us already do that. I think we can finish up this hour before we go to the top of the hour break and we bring Marshall in, because I am a proponent of the expanding Earth theory. I first read it on your website when you postulated it there. And I'm wondering if you can go into a little bit more in depth on the expando Earth theory, or If you see it as fact, that's fine. And how exactly it works and how it relates to these new sunspots and everything that's happening with the volcanoes and the earthquakes and all the weather phenomenon that we're seeing, and how exactly everything relates together for this expanding Earth.
And let's do it all in a minute and a half, yeah. Okay.
10 minutes. We got 10 minutes.
Oh, okay, no worries then. Hey, we can get a lot done in that time.
Okay.
The sun is its own energetic creature, and we are foolish to expect it to behave moderately in the sense of always being the same. And so the sun sends out various different kinds of energy in various different waves, and the Earth picks up on some of this energy. Some of it we use as light and so on, and we exist as a direct result of that energy. Much of it passes through us totally unknown and unaware, and a lot of it goes down into the middle of the planet. And it is my postulate that in the middle of the planet there is not a spinning ball of iron or any other metal, because molten or not, well, if it were in there, it'd have to be molten, and molten metal can't hold a magnetic field, therefore we know it's not molten metal. But it indeed is plasma, and plasma generates vast quantities of magnetic field, and plasma is basically just highly self-attracting electrical energy of a very particular kind. And what happens, this plasma attracts this energy as it goes through the planet, and it pulls into this giant plasma reactor, very much like a nuclear reactor core, and the plasma ball gets a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger, only it can't expand because it's surrounded by all this matter. And so it's sort of like in a pressure cooker, and so it can't turn to steam. So what it does is it creates new matter, literally actually creates new hydrogen, helium, all the way through the periodic table, and then it shoves that, because of the pressure in there, it shoves that newly created matter up into the other matter that's all around it, and that matter has to go somewhere. So basically it's all working its way out from the middle of the Earth, causing us poor guys out here on the crust of the Earth to have a very rough time at the moment, as the Earth is going through one of its expansion stages. And you can look at all kinds of really cool things that prove that expansion exists, or have a tendency to provide evidence towards that conclusion, such as the height of animals on the planet right now. Tallest animals on the planet are 17 and 18 feet and are giraffes, and you get them an extra foot higher and they fall over pretty nearly dead because their bodies are not able to pump the blood up that distance. And so you start looking at the actual physical reality. If our planet was this size at the time that the brontosaurs lived here, in order to pump blood up to their head, they would have had to have had a heart that occupied a space larger than their existing body, and it was huge. So we know that they weren't pumping blood against the gravity level that we have now, and you go through all these machinations and you come back to the idea that they lived on a much smaller planet, and that our planet goes through these periodic expansions that in the past have been misinterpreted by otherwise very intelligent and conclusive individuals like Hapgood and others as being crustal shifts. But the expansion of the planet means that the crustal shift theory is not necessary to accommodate all of the evidence of that they had interpreted as crustal shifts. And we're, unfortunately for us, or fortunately, depending on how you want to view it, in one of those expansion periods right at the moment. So the Earth is down there creating all kinds of new matter, because the sun is up here creating all kinds of new energy and shoving it at us as fast as it can. We used to live in a yellow sun environment. We're in basically a white moving towards a blue-white sun. As that continues, our Earth will continue to take on more energy and will continue to expand. I think there's evidence that offers a conclusion that these expansion events are periodic in nature. They come every so often. They're relatively brief in the sense that probably occupy only 100 years or more, with a very intense period of perhaps 5 to 20 years, and then they sort of fade out. But there's no real way for us to anticipate just how much of an expansion we're going to encounter here. And it could probably will get very much more violent than it has. And this brings us back to all of the volcanoes. The volcanoes are in the natural vents. As the Earth creates more matter, it has to pressurize it. It creates new rock, and as I say, all the gold, all the other elements are being created in the middle of the planet. They're all liquid and being smooshed up into what we think of as the mantle, and eventually they work their way up here. And this is how oil is created, and oil never came from dinosaurs, etc. All the volcanoes as vents are spewing out the molten rock, which is under the pressure of the new material underneath it. So we can expect a lot more volcanic activity as we get closer to the peak of this expansion, which by my calculation is going to run from March of next year through November of next year. And I could be wrong in terms of the terminus. It may not fade off in November. It may go all the way out until May of 2013. But I have a reason to suspect that the brunt of it will be from March until November, which means that we can expect, perhaps even a volcanic winter in the sense of so much volcano ash everywhere that it further exacerbates our already inclination towards an ice condition, and we end up with a really severe ice condition as a result of these two things occurring simultaneously. That's basically where we're at.
Now, this gives me a second thought. Does this, do you think, tie into the loss of the information that you're seeing?
I do indeed, because I actually
think they're tied together.
Yes, and for a lot of different reasons. We know, or we are forecasting that there are going to be infrastructure damages at levels that people would not anticipate. So for instance, at the moment, I'm anticipating that the undersea cables upon which much of the Internet is dependent are going to get into a rupture state as a result of Earth movement that will make them almost impossible to repair, at least a couple of these cables. And so that will contribute because it will isolate the Internet and it'll have to be rerouted, and I don't know exactly how that's going to work at the moment. But I'm sure we'll overcome those, but nonetheless, we are facing it.
Now, somebody's bound to ask this, so I'm going to go ahead and climb out on the old limb of the conversation here and go ahead and ask this question. Somebody's going to wind up asking, what about the supervolcanoes like Yellowstone? What's the your opinion? What do you see for that?
Yellowstone is, those are a spent force. All of the supervolcanoes were within a particular period of Earth's history. They have all, insofar as we're able to determine, exhausted the conditions that made them supervolcanoes. So at the time that Yellowstone was a supervolcano, there was a mountain range there that does not exist at the moment because it was blown into dust. All of the 12 or 14 giant magma pools that used to exist there are gone. They blew themselves out. So Yellowstone is just a spent, exhausted, mini little tiny series of volcanoes compared to what it used to be. Same thing as Krakatoa, same thing for Toba. There's one other area on the planet over near the Chatham Ridge northern extension in towards the Philippines that may harbor some capability of being a supervolcano situation in the making at some time in the future, way underneath the ocean floor at the moment. But that's the only one on the planet that you can determine exists. So, no, we're probably going to get all kinds of volcanic activity, but do I suspect that most of the area of Yellowstone is going to head towards the sky? No, that has already happened and won't be occurring. And you can actually look at that particular expansion. If you go back far enough into time and you look at how these expansions occurred, the ones that produced the supervolcanoes such that we ended up with, such as Krakatoa, that appeared to be the expansion at which we had ruptures that led to the formation of the oceans. So in other words, if the oceans had not occurred, if we hadn't had the ruptures that led to the oceans, then perhaps all of the supervolcanoes would have all blown themselves out all at once as part of that expansion. But because the Earth ruptured then the supervolcanoes were allowed to sort of go into a quiet state for a number of millennia, and then they started blowing up one after the other later on when we got into larger expansion events. Makes sense?
Okay. We're at the top of the hour now, so we're getting ready to start the second hour. I'm going to bring Marshall Masters back in, and he's going to introduce the second hour and tell us what our top of the hour musical selection is going to be. Marshall.
All right, guys.
Man, did I sound professional there.
Oh, man, you're slicker than deer guts on a doorknob, Bubba. I'm telling you. And for tonight, we've got a pretty good one that we found. Really think it fits. It is an early song by Frank Sinatra in his early crooner days. It's called the September Song, and as you listen to it, folks, the lyrics are a little appropriate to what we're seeing for this Oktoberfest, economics, and my concerns for November. And so in the next hour, we're going to bring Cliff back and bring Bill back, and we're going to get into disinformation. We've got a lot of conversation about what the elites are doing, but I think we need to be most focused right now on the disinformation so the folks you know, it's disinformation's like cockroaches. It's there. Everybody knows about it. Everyone's just got a different way of dealing with it. And we're going to talk about a couple of different ways to deal with it later on. So here we go, guys. We are going to have a little Frank Sinatra. So put out the cat, kiss the old lady, and have a good time. We'll be back in 3 minutes and 6 seconds. Tonight we're going to get back now with Cliff from the WebBot Project. And now I really want to get into something I think it's really important from a survival standpoint, and that is disinformation and how it is being used to keep people from getting clarity on what's happening to them and to their world. And so bringing Cliff back in, and with this, Cliff, I really enjoyed the first hour listening to your interview with Bill, and you guys really covered a lot of ground, particularly with regards to Yellowstone. I hope you're right about that. Yellowstone is still on the red list, and I would definitely wouldn't want to see that thing
nasty,
pop
but
off.
it's not. Yeah, it's not continent devastating. That's all.
It's not continent devastating, but it sure could. An eruption could take out the breadbasket. And that's for sure.
No, I'm sorry. I dispute that. I don't think an eruption in Yellowstone at this point would be a greater magnitude. In fact, I think it would be a less magnitude than we saw with St. Helens. And the largest volcanic problem we have in the United States is Rainier. The second is probably somewhere along on the west coast. Mount Rainier, if it goes, it would be very devastating, but even it's not a supervolcano. And so the idea that the breadbasket in the square states all the way over to the Mississippi and then north would be removed, I dispute that.
Okay. Well, we have other experts that are saying the opposite, but then everybody brings something different to the picnic. It makes the food tasty, right?
Right, but also a lot of the other experts, of course, are operating under the idea that the Earth is a static, has always been this same size, and a bunch of their basic assumptions are quite bogus, and it can be demonstrated to them that their assumptions are bogus. So if that's the case, then their whole science has a big hole. So it does bear thinking about that just because someone is an expert does not mean that they are in any way knowing. If they're an academic, a lot of their assumptions are invalid, and therefore their position may also be invalid.
Well, I don't have a PhD, which means I don't have the right to be wrong. I just have the right to pay for it.
No, yeah, and actually that kind of stuff, I appreciate the levity there, but we've got to start taking ownership on this. I'm a sovereign individual. I have no degree whatsoever. And to me, a PhD means piled higher and deeper. It means you can just sit there longer and suck up this erroneous crud longer. It does not mean you're in any way more educated. It merely means you're more schooled. And until individuals wake up and realize there's a difference between schooling and education, we will continue to tout so-called academics, the academics, as so-called experts, and they are not. Many of them can't even think cohesively, couldn't think their way out of a paper sack. Sorry, this kind of stuff irritates me.
I got a sense of that.
Yeah, sorry about that. I'm a raspy old guy with no hair, so you watch out.
That's right. There was this celestial wisp of ether or something. But
there you go.
No, I agree with you. I think what's interesting more today than anything else is to hear them say again and again, that's unexpected. Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't know we needed to relocate that airport and turn it so that it's now facing the new North Pole.
Yeah. And, it's like, gosh, we really thought, our tsunami defenses were more than enough for Fukushima for 100 years, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so, and we know.
But that's also part of the disinformation thing you were talking about. And I stumbled into that in a serious way in 2003 when we ran across this concept that I called memering at the time. Mm-hmm. Where I thought I was running into these organized gangs, if you will, of people that were all spouting the same language. And now I know what I was looking at were the early years of the disinfo ops as they were making their software better and better and better. What from my viewpoint, what gets them is that, okay, they've got a they've got a software out there now that the military uses that I think allows an individual to run maybe as many as several hundred personas. But the problem, of course, is that they don't understand the variance in language.
Right. Let's just do this before we, because
Sure.
I always like to explain acronyms when we drop them on people, or definitions. All right. And so, when you're talking about disinformation, we're talking about the wolf packs and how they're doing it, software. It's all very sophisticated. Just to give people an example, all right, of what we're talking about here, folks. On YouTube right now, you have like or dislike, and that's it, which is a much fairer system of rating videos. But as you might recall, there was, from the beginning, there was a 5-star rating. And so your videos could get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stars, depending on how people liked it. And in an egalitarian world, that is a great way to do it. However, what the disinfos were running is that they had automatic sniffers, just like your web bots that you guys are running, building aggregation for your database. They're out there monitoring channels. And if you're flagged, the minute you put up a video, the instant you put up a video, a half a dozen personas are going to flag it 1 star at that time. Literally, I remember one video I put up, and it got 7 1-star reviews within the first 13 seconds of going live.
They call it corralling, by the way.
Sexting, corralling, that's right. So they do that out there. Now, here's a point that I want to talk. That's just one of the tools, too. They got a toolkit that I would drool just to get whatever falls out of the kit. But when we're talking about the Comet Elenin topic, and this is something that from the beginning was we couldn't understand why the disinfos were cranking it up so hot, so heavy. I mean, I could see the wolf packs out there doing all the stunts, all right, whipping it up, really whipping it up. And then they came after me. It was after I published an article in May. And I asked the question, the title of the article is Comet Elenin a Decoy, ? Once I posted that article, within 3 days, something happened to us. Never happened before. I've been selling books through Amazon since 2002, since 2003, okay? My books have been on Amazon. Always have been 1 to 3 days, because that's the way I'm set up with my Ingram distribution account. But the minute I put up that article, is Comet Elenin a decoy, they slammed me on Amazon, and what they did was they singled me out. I mean, I've spoken with VPs at my distribution accounts and all of that, and they're working like dogs to try and get this lifted. But what they started doing is flagging all my books to 2 to 3 weeks for delivery instead of 1 to 3, and that slows things down. Now, I knew that was the only way that they were going to get me was through something like that, and they picked a couple of small titles from other publishers and did the same thing, but I was the only guy that was across the board getting hammered, okay? And so, obviously, this was somebody in Amazon picks up the phone and within 30 seconds is saying, anything for a fellow lodge member, I'll screw the guy. Thank you, click, and that's it.
That's
all right?
Undoubtedly what occurred, yeah.
That's undoubtedly what occurred.
And whether it was at the IT department or the executive department level, it doesn't make any difference.
Doesn't make any difference. Once they do it, and Amazon will not, Amazon will not explain themselves to Ingram. That was the most frustrating thing for Ingram.
Well, but see, there's part of the problem. They actually have a legitimate reason for that because of the amount of proprietary theft and the system that they operate in. Even if they are honest brokers at the organizational level, then they have 2 issues they have to deal with. Dishonest individuals within their otherwise honest broker organization, the fellow lodge member approach, and or Their problem is that they're just dealing with proprietary software problems that are forced on them by the policies of our government. So they can't really reveal it because their software isn't patented and all of their processes and so on. And in fact, your thing was a 1 byte. They turned 1 byte on, and that was what altered your delivery issues.
That's it. I mean, but that's how, in other words, that's how they do it. So, fine. If it weren't for the fact I sell my books directly and our regular publisher, like most authors, I mean, I see regular authors out there, and they're the one-trick ponies. They will come out with one book, really killer, and then, boom, they're gone like methane in the breeze, and they're moonwalking backwards out of their topics because they've got it's so easy. There are so many middlemen that it is just all too easy for the elites to nail them. But and I'm just not, and I'm not mentioning it tonight because, folks, come cry. I want to go cry on your shoulders. Hey, like they say in the movies, Vinny, this is the life we chose, right? That's it. You're going to be honest and truthful, and you're going to report on these things. Someone's not going to want you to do it. So you just got to, you deal with it and you keep going until someone shows up one day and puts a 9mm through your brain pan.
No, there's other options to that. I mean, we can all stand up and every time we run into it, we can say this is a corrupt act and bring it to their attention and then point it out to them in a factual manner. One of the things about the whole
that works kind of,
No, that doesn't work. That doesn't work for you, the individual. Okay.
No.
But this is the same thing that you were discussing, that we were discussing earlier, and that is the level of isolation and whether or not people are feeling this, and discussing the 20-something market retailer person that is aware of these things and is tracking them that you did not know existed. This is the dog walking hour all over again. And I've told that story before, but it's about Russia and when they were in the communist era and how everybody was isolated and they were always being set on by the system itself, and you cooperated with the system because everybody cooperated with the system. No one ever did anything against the system. So you were a fool to be thinking otherwise. Yet in your soul you knew it was corrupt and you didn't want to live there, and you expressed this continuously by being an alcoholic or a rage addict or any other number of behaviors that the state allowed to exist in order to vent that rage. And then something occurred. And what it was this thing called the dog walking hour. And the Russians finally synchronized all of their national news across all 12 time zones to a single time zone and had an hour of national news every day in an attempt to unify their very diverse population with 160 different racial groups and across 12 time zones into a cohesive modern nation. And it destroyed the communist system because nobody could stand to sit there and watch hour after hour every night as the state lied to them through the official media, their version of Wolf Blitzer and others, and you couldn't stand it because you knew they were telling you lies because they were lying about stuff you personally had lived through. And so what everybody did was they turned off their TV and they'd go walk their dogs from 9 to 10 at night or whenever the news was on in their local time zone. And lo and behold, they discovered there's a lot of other people out there walking their dogs. I wonder if they're out here just because the dog needs to go out or because the news is on. Maybe I'll go and talk to them. Next thing you know, they were all chatting and they realized they weren't isolated and how powerful they were. And that's when the White Revolution began.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and what really, it's hard for people here in America to relate to, many people, but it would definitely be the case again. My wife grew up in Russia, all right? Yeah. And her parents lived in an apartment block. It was 6 stories tall, and they were up on the 5th story. And the Russian elevators are these, I mean, they look like something that was, it looks like something they hauled out of the Titanic or something. And
or a couple of washing machines quickly welded together.
And it sounds like it too. And the thing of it is in the building was like after midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. You couldn't hear anything because, the walls are super thick, but they could hear those elevators. And everybody knew the sound of the elevator would make when it stopped at their floor. And she said, what she remembered most of her childhood was hearing the elevator start up at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning and praying to God it didn't stop at their floor.
Yeah, yeah.
Because that was KGB.
We're coming to that.
KGB.
Our data suggests that that's headed here.
Huh? Yeah, I mean it's coming that way, but now, you know, and there is we do have one question I want to ask you real fast and get right back to this, but it's from Barb of the South, and she wants to know about the New Madrid. If you guys are seeing anything about a New Madrid eruption.
We have a data set that we've had for a long time that was about a devastating earthquake that was going to hit the continental United States and was going to destroy bridges for 1,000 miles. You know, basically 1,000, in the middle of it, it'd be 500 miles either way. And so that really fits with New Madrid more than any of the other descriptors, except for a particular place in the coast of California. And the area of the West Coast has been...
I can't think of California where you'd have, I mean, it would definitely would be, if you're going to take out bridges for 1,000 miles.
Yeah, there actually is technically a place there where you'd get Canadian bridges as well as ours, but the fault line wouldn't support it. So New Madrid is probably going to be that site. Yeah, but also let's bear in mind the New Madrid fault occurred 100 years ago in this year, in 200 years ago in 1811 and 12, and it was 3 earthquakes. And yes, everybody really needs to understand it, especially in that area, especially if you live in a brick building, because brick buildings are so susceptible to these kind of earthquakes. Right. But earthquakes in and of themselves do not kill people. Okay, it is bad engineering that kills people, and you can do things to protect yourself from bad engineering, even if you're only a casual person walking into them. I happened to be in a hotel in Mexico City during an 8.1 earthquake. It was not my environment. I was down there doing a consulting gig, and the earthquake decided that was the day it was going to shake this hotel and kill vast quantities of Mexican City residents, and I had to deal with it and cope with that particular situation. But in the process of going into that hotel, I just checked out the various triangular voids. I knew where to go. I knew how to react to it. And yes, it was a unsettling experience, but and it was exciting in the sense of adrenaline, but it was not fear-producing, and it didn't kill me, and it didn't kill the vast majority of people. So New Madrid is a fear at one level, and it is a practical thing to deal with at the other level. Shift all your attention to the practical level, and the fear part goes away.
Well, I agree with that, and I always tell folks to be in awareness and to be looking around. You know, I mean, when
and this is something I've done.
Yeah, you get on an airplane, you count seats to the exits. I mean, it is. Yeah. It's just common sense stuff that we just don't do it as we used to anymore. But, I mean...
There's also one other thing, though, and that is that the particular area of New Madrid, under the current conditions, we have what's known as the 220 million person corridor of the eastern United States that will be affected and was affected by the Virginia earthquake. And what the sad part of this is that, and this is part of your job, so to speak, in terms of as on radio, is to remind all these individuals to go on out and do their Google and look for the Triangle of Life article that explains about how to survive earthquakes even if the building you're in is not earthquake proof. And because you guys don't live in earthquake country, you don't know about the Triangle of Life kind of a thing, and it's very easy to spot these as you go in, but you need to be told once. So you just need to read through these articles about how to deal with it, and then you'll be safe. But don't do the hide under the desk, don't get under a table, and don't get under a door jamb. Those are sure killers. Most door jambs will separate, and the lintel will come down and crush your head.
Yeah, I know that. So, I mean, it's, you know, and definitely it's a good thing for people to do that, to be mindful, to be in an awareness situation. But then there are people that don't want us to be in awareness. They want the numbers. They, you know, what I'm seeing here when I'm looking at, and this incident I talked about with this organic farmer I met today. This little gal who all of a sudden knows about junk's falling out of the sky, the sun. What's an organic farmer following this for? All right. And that was the thing. Then it did a reverse flip to me because there was another side to this. I saw the movie Contagion that just came out. I don't know if you've seen it.
No, I don't watch movies. No, I mean
Okay.
I watch them when they're old and on TV, but no, I don't watch them in the theater.
Well, I mean, I go out occasionally when they're hitting on a topic in this area. I went to watch Contagion. Contagion is, to me, it was just an absolute classic propaganda film, period. It was, the whole thing of the film is, don't worry, the elites have everything in control, and the guys that are the conspiracy theories are collaborating with Wall Street crooks to cheat everybody with false scares and all of that. So, I mean, the movie, the movie itself was, I mean, you have people dying all over the place in the movie, but the plot basically flatlines right from the get-go. And it's a dry thing that they just pump it out for the propaganda thing, but it's one of those, don't believe all the things people say about us, the elites are on top of this and we'll save everyone's lives and blah, 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 and the happy nonsense. And so you finish, you get up, you walk out, and you go, I paid for this. You know, and it's really disappointing, but the sense of what I am seeing right now, all right, and the muddiness they're creating in the water is that they're really trying to make it more difficult than ever before for people to actually to find good information, one, and to find people that they can trust. Most especially
they're
for people,
successful in the latter, I would agree.
Yeah.
I would dispute that they're successful in the former, though. I think that they're fighting a losing battle, and they're now very much aware of it. Yeah.
Yeah, they know that. I mean, what I have seen, Cliff, is they're getting reckless compared to
desperate. Yeah,
desperate.
That's what produces the recklessness. Yes.
That produces the recklessness, and it's they're having to slap the Band-Aids on faster than they can pull the adhesive off the paper, okay?
That's correct, yes. They've really got issues going, and it's degrading around them quite rapidly, and I actually didn't ever think it would reach this point, and it's very thrilling to be living in it right now, and over this next month or so, if we were to have the same interview a month from now, the questions would not be at all the same.
Thrilling? Cliff, you are the past master of understatement.
I try my best, but it is truly. I mean, it's quite thrilling. It's really exciting. We were all looking for a really exciting life when this one came along.
Okay. I don't know. I mean, I'd much rather just, if I hadn't have gotten all this, I would have had a nice life publishing books on computer. No. Imagine what it would have been like to live in the 5th century, in any kind of a life where you only went 20 miles from your village. No, that kind of stuff is, you're here now because of the kind of times that we're in. What is it? Si c'est milieu non l'homme. It's the times, not the man. And so, yeah, we're in that situation at the moment where the times are dictating all of this. In terms of being thrilling for us, you've got to. That's our only power. The only thing we actually control in reality is our attitude. Because the universe can come along and slap you upside the head with a rock, or send gamma rays in and skewer you, and you couldn't do anything about either of them. Universe controls circumstances far more than humans would like to give credit to. However, we do control our attitude about things. And so if we decide we're going to approach this with, a positive, this is a thrilling time to be alive, we can't wait to get into this and really start, tearing into the guts of it all, then we get a different attitude about those times, and we control what's going on. And if you, as you say, fall into the disinformation and start buying into the fear and all of that, then they're the ones that are controlling the flavor of it. And I'm not giving them the satisfaction. My teeth are sharp, and I know how to gnaw. Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. It's just that it's what I'm looking at, to me, just from my point of view, dealing with disinformation for me is about as heartwarming an experience as going to Walgreens to choose whichever hemorrhoid ointment I want that day. Okay?
Well,
I mean,
sorry you've got hemorrhoids, but
I don't.
On the other side of that, the issue.
I don't.
I know your issue with the disinformation.
Yeah. Disinformation.
For me, it was interesting though because we had to filter it out.
Huh?
I say for me, it's interesting because we have to actively filter it out. So it made me a better programmer and gave me a lot greater appreciation for the linguistics involved in just being able to filter out these the persona software.
Now, how much in terms of the persona software? All right. You're looking at trending it. You're seeing more recklessness. The question is I mean, it's definitely on the uptick. Where is your data model showing that this trend with the way the elites are really? I mean, they grab whatever's at hand and throw it at it. All right, I'm seeing that, and it is still effective. But let's project this down for the next 2 to 3 months, maybe a year out.
No, it doesn't go that far.
All right, so we have huge trip over the door jamb and fall into a void because your porch isn't there kind of changes that will occur between now and March. So a lot of the stuff that we're dealing with now will not be pertinent from March onward of next year. It may be that we still have the disinfo people, but from March onward they're going to be trailing off, and I doubt that the government will have enough money to pay half of them by March, but if they're paying any of them at all or have any money at all. And by June, we'll be dealing with a radically changed national structure here, such that the idea of someone actually sitting down and wasting their time doing disinfo will be laughable. You'll have much more pressing, immediate things to concern yourself with than that sort of foolishness. All right, so you're seeing an abatement of it on the internet, but where's the rest of it going to go? I mean, they're not going to give up those efforts, and even if they have to scale back.
Yes, they are going to give up those efforts. It will not continue. It's not in perpetuity. It's a relatively recent thing. It's a brief example of some of their desperation in trying to keep certain things under control that's already failing, and they recognize that. And it is my supposition by March of next year, the gloves have to come off, and they will have to if they're going to be doing propaganda and that sort of thing, they will not be doing anything subtle like disinfo. By March of next year, and from that point forward, that's when we really get into this global evolution issue. And so if the powers that be are going to remain in control, they will license you as to whether you get on the internet, and they'll track every single keystroke you make, so it's not a question of disinfo. I mean, look, the Federal Reserve is writing software now. The Federal Reserve banksters, a criminal cabal that is owned by people that do not even exist or are not citizens of the United States, that are foreigners. They own our money. Our national debt is owed to foreigners, and these people have the gall to let out a request for programmers to program software to run through the internet to find out what the sentiment is that you have about them, such that the next action they could take would be to declare your sentiment to be treasonous. And these people are corrupt. They are the creme de la corrupt. You know, they're at the top of the bankster cabal. And, you know, the banks are coming down. By the end of 2012, the idea of checks and banks and that sort of thing will be not in most people's life experience anymore.
Okay.
The idea that we're going to go through some kind of a, quote, revolution or a rebellion that will, and we would come out the other side and still have such ludicrous ideas as a Republican and a Democrat Party is absurd. When we hit the March wall, March of 2012, from that point on, the hard edge really starts moving, and it will not be in the hands of people our age. It will be the Moon and Virgo generation that will take over. And they're just getting their teeth all sharpened right now.
The Moon and Virgo people?
Yeah, 80s, late 80s, early 90s, that group, that generation, that from them came the millennials.
Okay.
So they're in
All
their
right.
20s now. They're in their 20s, and they don't buy any of this. They don't watch television. They laugh when they go to see movies that are propaganda films like Contagion. In fact, they wouldn't spend their money to see it. They would, if they wanted to see any component of it, they would just do the smart thing and get a quick Chinese bootleg, because they live in a world in which the corruption so surrounds them that they cannot support any level of corruption, and therefore they themselves, if you will, ride the corruption wave in a sense of like pristine purity. They don't care that they're taking a bootleg, and this world is theirs. And I'm here to say that they're going to start marching around in quite numbers in next March and change everything.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, all right, let's do this. Let's just say, because I have a question, but then we had one that kind of dovetails with that from someone in the virtual chat room that Susan's tossed over to me. By the way, in the virtual chat room, Susan, thank you, darling. You're a sweetheart. This is from EKLMDRACHIR. I'd love to have this guy just come on to pronounce his screen name. It says, ask Cliff to elaborate on the latest report and what specifically changed from the previous report to the last report. I'd actually want to say trending back through the last year of reports. What have you seen in the last year that you've been doing reports, new elements that are popping up and redefining the data sets?
A bunch of them relative to the space goat farts entity. A bunch of those relative to the unknown energies are new. There's all kinds of new growth in that entity in terms of not just new supporting sets, but new sets that are forming. New linguistic structures in there are shaping up. We've had a lot of new growth in populous entities, but to a certain extent it's more new supporting details to existing trend lines. But within the space goat farts, the interesting part has been the growth in some areas that we're very hesitant to talk about, such as the new electrics, okay? The reason I'm hesitant to talk about it is that I don't want to send people off on spurious hunts just because I get the details wrong and make them waste money when they might have otherwise legitimately have invested in the new electrics if they just sat on their butt in Houston. Sort of make sense? So I don't discuss a lot of those at the detail level, but we've had a great degree of growth there, and we've actually had the self-defining principles that we use for the entities are now showing up in what we call Civilization 1, and that's our working title for this new entity that we had originally called Future Pop, but I think now that the Future Pop is going to have to be split into Civilization 1 and those that remain behind, so to speak. Civilization 1 is a new entity that is appearing to extract itself primarily from Populous USA entity, but also from Global Pop. And so I'm very interested to see how that shakes out, because there actually is such a thing. There actually is the breakaway civilization that is underneath all of us that's been sucking and taking our blood from us for all of my life. All these 58 years, every year of my life that I've produced anything on this planet, part of that production was sucked away by the Black Ops world. And it was used to support this Civilization 1. And a great number of our problems in terms of beyond the engineered war and the engineered famine that the powers that be use, a huge amount of the suffering on the planet can be laid directly at the doorstep of Civilization 1 as they've taken away vast quantities of resources. And I suspect that we're within months, in fact, they may even be within weeks, of trying another huge money grab. And if that's the case, what we'll see is like an equities crash or implosion, drop down to like 8,900 on the Dow, that kind of thing. Sudden shoot up in gold and silver prices, and then instant restriction on the ability to buy either of those. So they'll come up with some law that, probably like the French, where they'll say, oh, too many people are stealing copper, and so it'll be illegal to buy or sell any metal whatsoever for cash. You'll have to fill out forms in order to buy or sell metal, and you'll have to use checks, and you'll have to get approved by the government. And that effectively shuts down the whole gold and silver industry. All the legitimate traders will go through all of the trouble, but it'll effectively curtail the ability to buy any metal whatsoever. And they're going to go that route real quick, I think. We're seeing the trial runs. So it's going to be very interesting to see how the economics play out. But when the November period hits, from probably the middle on, we're into building tension. So I think that'll be the denouement in terms of everybody will be able to, everybody will clearly be able to acknowledge that, the stock market's toast, and it'll be a whole generation or 2 or 3 generations before we ever think of such a screwiness again.
Well, yeah, I see that coming when I read your report. When I read your report in a nutshell, it's 1930s all over again, global economic crisis, governments in disarray, strong men coming to power, and on top of all that, everything will be everything will be right as rain once we kill all the Jews. That's it.
No, that's not true. I don't state that, but they will be offered up as a sacrifice. That's not my position, though. I want to make that
That's
clear.
Not your position, but that is, I'm not saying it's your position. I'm saying I'm looking at the data set that you're reporting.
And I agree with you there. There's going to be they're going to use the banksters and the Zionists are going to use the Jewish population and attempt to get the rest of us to hate them and take out all of our vengeance on them instead of focusing on the true elements of our suffering, which is, the Zionists who are just merely the stooges for the powers that be. Well, if I were Jewish, I'd be very, very, very nervous if I were part of an organized Jewish community, because they are being set up. And they are being set up by people that know them intimately and pretend to be part of their community. And it's just like what happened in the 30s again.
I wouldn't think they're so foolish this time. The last time, while the rest of the world, before World War II, you had Winston
Would we be so
Churchill
foolish, though, to elect a person who participated in that?
Now, the point I'm making is up to prior to World War II, you had Winston Churchill published editorials about Hitler, condemning him, and the British media didn't really particularly like that. They were saying more glowing things about Hitler than what Churchill was saying in his negative commentary, all right? So we see the same thing, the same patterns repeating itself again, and what you really find out is that the people that are saying the evil things that everyone gets excited about are the ones that are going to do evil to everybody. That was the lesson from back then. It was the reason why Churchill was swept in, because the guy had a clear bead on what was happening. As far as it goes for Israel and what's happening there, I'm
not actually worried about them.
I'm not worried about them. I'll tell you why. In 1973, they got caught with their pants down. Okay? Literally got caught with their pants down. I was in the Army at the time. I was in the National Guard. My unit was put on reserve. We couldn't leave the state because during the 1973 war, Nixon was actually getting ready to send us over there because we were a desert-trained unit, all right? And so, I was familiar with that, but we were familiar with what happened and how the Israelis had been lulled into a false sense of security. And, the Syrians were very good at it. They would pull their tanks up, set up positions.
It does no good, though, to put us back to there. The times of 1973 are gone.
But no, not for Israel.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. Look at what's going to happen next year. Israel is going to lose 99% of their military budget when our economy takes a nosedive here in November. They're already planning on a 60% military budget cut in Israel. The United States spends more, we have more blood sucked from our citizenry to support this military than all the other militaries on the planet. We spend more money on our military than all the other militaries on the planet combined. And we're going to lose that instantly this fall when our economy crashes. And part of that money supports Israel. Israel is, as a state, is a Rothschild invention created to be destroyed at this time. And so they will do and be treated as the Rothschilds, the Bauer family, decide they shall be treated. And so the Rothschilds had decided they are going to be sacrificed again this time. What I'm really worried about is the potential for a radical theocracy movement within the United States during the social chaos that would tend to focus on the Jewish people here simply because of the disproportionate number of Jews in the elite establishment and in the banks who, true, the banksters are criminals. I don't care if they're Jewish or not. They're simply criminal first, and they need to be dealt with. And they will be dealt with in the course of this, but there will be an attempt to castigate the Jewish population, unnecessarily, or from the part of the viewpoint of the powers that be. They've got to do it. They've got to have a scapegoat desperately because so many people now know the names of the powers that be, and we can find out where they live and all of this kind of thing. And pretty soon, the nut jobs who are starving and, otherwise we think of them as regular humans who used to have jobs and families and houses, but these nut jobs are going to be classified as homegrown terrorists and have the Blackwater kind of group said about them. But believe me, there's millions and millions and millions of these people that are going to fall into that nut job category, and the elite are not safe. And they will do anything they can, including mount a massive campaign against the Jewish population to get this bloodlust out rather than have it focus on them.
Well, I don't think they're going to be successful.
I doubt that as well, but we won't want to live through it because even being
your exciting times are not going to be so exciting. Your exciting times are not going to be so exciting. I'll tell you what, man.
Yeah.
If you think Israel is going to get caught with its pants down, economics, whatever, they know it. Anybody, if economic suppression, what, they did that with Iran, what, just slows them down. Did it with Sadat, it doesn't slow them down. They did it with Gaddafi, it doesn't slow them down, so you throttle the economies. There's always money for a bomb. But the point here, and I think what a lot of the people miss, is it goes back to perestroika and Gorbachev. And he opened the doors and he said to the Jews in Russia, you can leave and you can go to Israel. And he didn't restrict it. And Russia lost a good chunk of its top theoretical weapons engineers in every field. And if you think those guys are running falafel stands in Tel Aviv, you're naive.
No, I used to work with some of them up at Microsoft. I know exactly what they're doing, and I'm not naive. But my naivete does not include a worship of Israel as a state, uber all. I do have an expectation that the world is in a state of massive levels of change, and Israel will not be immune from that, neither will the United States. And to sit and pronounce that it will be simply because you have a basis of a feeling as opposed to understanding.
It's not going to be, it's not going to be immune. Everybody's going to hurt. The point here is that what I see is the same lead up to World War II with its insanity, directed hate, all right? But in the final analysis, it's not even about who wins or who loses. It's who's left alive, okay?
That's not true. That is not true. In the World War II, the powers that be won, everybody else lost. In World War III, the powers that be will win, everybody else will lose. If you fight in there thinking, if you are fighting for the state of Israel as a patriot, you are fighting for the House of Rothschild. You just don't know it. You're a deluded fool. If you are involved in fighting for the United States of America, thinking you are propping up our corrupt dictatorship against the terrorist of the evil Muslims, you are a fool. You are being deluded into killing people for the powers that be. War is a racket. It has always been a racket. I was born into the military. I spent 17 years into it. I saw it from the inside, and I'm smart enough to have educated myself into its complete, or not even complete, but it's just even half of its ramifications, and I know it's a racket. The idea that Israel's going to be exempt and they're going to win forever and all of this, I'm sorry, but you are deluded.
No, I didn't say that they're going to win forever.
No, but you're under the impression that they can survive without a military budget, and 60% of their military budget goes away already by agreement as of January 1. And I'm to say to you that we will not, as citizens of the United States, starve ourselves to keep Israel propped up when our economy goes bluey here 3 weeks from now.
Well, then, time tells.
It will indeed. And I think from the 7th of October onward, we need to be very, very, very vigilant here. And I'm not angry at you. I am angry at these assumptions that we need to do things like provide Israel money to give them money. We need to stand up to every Jewish person around and say, wake up to Zionism and understand what your role is in that, as we need to shake every American and say, stand up to the corruption that is fascism and understand your role in that. We're graduating more people right now that can control predators and drop bombs with no moral ramification and no risk to them than we are pilots. Our goal is to get people here that are so good at video games to do this predator thing. It is no accident that Nintendo and all of these other companies were given policies by our government to encourage them to bring in foreign workers to get the level of the video games to what we might as well realistically call simulations, so that we can educate our population from age 2 onward to become killing machines that will do so with no moral consequence whatsoever, not even a thought of it, and they'll do so at the request, at the instruction of the powers that be, and not even think about it. Push that button, drop that predator. You don't care if it hits a village in Afghanistan or someplace in Cincinnati. You can't tell the difference. You just are responding to a little video game. If they put up a screen that shows that your predator is over Afghanistan, but in fact it's over Cincinnati, and the targets can be made to look similar, you'll never know. And that's the world we're entering into. And to think otherwise is delusion. It's not business as normal. A global war has been declared. David Icke is perfectly correct. A global war was declared years ago, and you only have to open your eyes up to participate in it. And you're participating in it with your eyes shut. Even when you have them shut, you're just, cannon fodder. At least with your eyes open, you can do some twisting and dodging.
Okay. So where do you see it all ending?
I don't look for an end. I'm not an absolutionist. I'm a human. Time goes on and stuff, right?
So you're looking.
It's a struggle.
Let's say
it's a struggle.
You're looking a year down the road from now.
Right.
A year down the road from now. Where are we at? Give us a picture of what the world looks like a year from today.
Okay, in October, November of next year, we're going to be facing a huge amount of solar energy levels that are even greater than what we're into now. And we will have gone through a year of starvation because the food crops of the planet will have been withered. We'll have had weather go really crazy. We will have had massive levels of earthquakes that will have added to the Fukushima effect, with dozens of other nuclear plants going bad, and many of them starting to get really bad and spew stuff out. We'll have had social unrest spread across the northern hemisphere, except for areas of relative stability like Russia. The United States will be in chaos. China will be in chaos. Japan will be in chaos as many portions of their population flee the increasing devastation there. And that's the background against which we'll all be operating and trying to make some level of new normal in a way of a life through this. The radiation levels will be high. We'll be having levels of mutation. Our infant mortality rate in the United States is due to skyrocket in 2012, but it's only a precursor to what's going to happen to the rest of the northern hemisphere, and so on and so on and so on.
All right.
Now,
what is the causality driving all of these natural changes?
I don't know that. I mean, at an ultimate level, I can't know that. I'm merely a human trapped in materium. How could I possibly know that? It's not knowable by any human. Now, if you want to talk about any individual level of change, we can speculate on some things, and we can deduce some things from evidence, but can we know it all? No.
But you just talked about a whole series of natural disasters, all right?
Sure. A lot of the natural disasters are all pegged on the sun. They have nothing to do with the comets. Comets are merely irritants to the sun and may cause momentary exacerbations, but they are not the cause. The sun goes through a solar cycle that is 26,000 years long. It has to do with the magnetics. The equator of the sun laps the pole of the sun, so it is as though Egypt was rotating around faster than Anchorage. And so every so often, Egypt would gain on Anchorage and would lap Anchorage because it was going around faster than Anchorage. And so the Sphinx and all of that would eventually get to the point where it had lapped once, twice, 3 or 4 times, and then over a few thousand years, it would lap the North Pole repeatedly. Now, this happens every X number of days on the sun. Every 58 days, we get to go through one of these little lapping cycles, and a magnetic twist builds. So So that over time builds up these magnetic vortices on the sun that then have to be released in these magnificent explosions of magnetic force. And we're due to face one of those. It happens periodically. So that is driving a lot of the energetic response of the Earth, because as these magnetic force lines twist around the sun themselves, they are like a thing we call a tokamak, or a magnetic field containment vessel. And that magnetic field containment vessel is capable of altering the stuff inside that it contains, the plasma in there. Thus the change from a yellow sun to a white sun, as the magnetics squeeze the sun tighter without changing its physical shape or size, they're squeezing it at an energetic level and causing the excitation to be that much higher. And thus we get a higher level of energy of particles which come roaring on into the Earth, and thus the Earth expands, along with all the other planets. It's not unique to the Earth. Although we note that the moon isn't reacting, because the moon is a hollow, dead sphere. And, you know, it's placed there and is artificial. But even, Mars doesn't react because it doesn't have a plasma core, but the other planets are. Mercury, Venus, all the way out to the gas giants, etc.
Well, I mean, we've documented how that we're seeing all these changes. But the question I have is, all right, you're pegging to solar activity. All right. Now,
which also affects humans, by the way. A lot of the craziness that humans are going through has to do with all the high-energy particles whizzing through our mind space.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, I agree with that completely. If the surface of the planet is 70% water, we're made of 70% water, why should we be any different?
And see, I look at it in an entirely different way, though. At a much higher level of elevation, we are energetic beings. We are not solid. The only reason we think of ourselves as solid, or even think of water as being quasi-solid, is because our minds only operate at 60 frames a second, and the universe is creating itself continuously at 22 trillion times a second, and then destroying itself in the little gaps between the 22 trillion times a second. And this is what allows for motion and movement within what we call the universe. And so at that energetic level, we're even reacting to the energy levels that come out of the sun. So it's not merely tidal effects or the water in your brain sloshing around. It's at the level of the things that create the molecules that you call your body. At that level, you're reacting to the new energies coming out of the sun. And it's making a lot of people crazy.
Okay, well, last question. With the solar energy, and you're seeing this change in the sun, is this based on data, core samples that have been drawn, that you've been able to see that this is limited strictly to the sun and the Earth? In other words, it's just purely the known objects, or are there unknown objects in your data that draws you to these conclusions?
There's the unknown within the space code stuff that got us onto this idea a long time ago, before I got into the expansion of the planet theory. Mm-hmm. So there is the stuff within the data that does point to all of universe not being as we are told. And then the more you investigate it, so a lot of this is my conclusion. The data itself doesn't suggest. The data has always pointed out sun disease, and it was the subsequent 11 or 12 years of self-education in terms of all things physics that led me to the conclusions about how the sun is reacting. But the data has always held, even from the very first time in 1997 that I ran the results, sun disease was going to seriously impact humanity. And to see it in 97 and it was pointing at 2012, well, that's a long time for your postulate to be at work. So I suspect we're going to get a real big emotional response from the sun next year, or to the sun next year.
Yeah, well, it doesn't matter how you get there to that conclusion. There are a lot of roads that lead to the same destination, and that is what I am seeing. A whole lot of roads leading to the same destination.
We're all going to fall into that same hole together. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
that's why I kind of like to bring Pi along with me. At least people won't be too irritated.
It's, and for folks today, it was nice just seeing that little lady, organic farmer, who's sitting there in the wear. I mean, you got an active sun. We have a lot of space junk that's falling out of the sky. Blue-green is, that's copper. So, I mean, the copper that's in these things is melting off. But it's coming in on shallow descents. So we're seeing this stuff rain down, and I'm seeing more reports of it, in my mailbox than I see in the media. And we've got 1302 sitting there. I mean, this sunspot's so big, you can see it with the naked eye. I mean, that's stunning, especially since we've had such a long period of quiescence. So people are sensing things. It's all heading that way. And I think it's just, yeah, we just keep doing the work.
The people sensing thing is probably they're reacting at that subconscious psychic level to the impact of the sun on their bodies and on their mind and their energetic being. And I think you're quite correct. We're all being swept along, and it's kind of like, I have to apologize. I get all whipped up. I'm an old bald guy, and I get raspy and irritated about some things simply because I'm old, I think. But we're all being swept up into the same little bin, and it's kind of going to be real interesting from my viewpoint because we only have a few weeks to go before the larger mass of the populace is going to open up their eyes and basically say, what? What's going on here?
There we go.
And it'll be up to the rest of us to say, yo, look that way.
And unfortunately, we just actually ran off the clock here. So, we'll just have to wrap it. I didn't want to interrupt you. You're on a roll. But
sorry about that. Yeah, okay.
No, we'll just have to finish it up another time. Do me a favor, just stay available next to your phone. We'll give you a call back. And it's halfpasthuman.com, folks. And it's been a great show. You've been a heck of a guest. And Bill, you guys really had a good time. So I'm going to go ahead and close her on out, but hang around your phone there for me, Cliff.
Sort of a dark view of that future that is impinging on our consciousness collectively at that time. And the process was initially begun in 1993 when I had a few insights and started the software programming. It took me until 97 to write all the code necessary. Actually, the initial part, I was writing code for another 5 years after that. But then I did my first run in 97, and since then we've been off and going. Sort of makes sense?
I believe that makes perfect sense for the layperson because I am, in fact, believe it or not, a layperson. And that's a perfect answer. I think that'll give our audience a good clue as to what the WebBot is all about. And
right.
The first question,
it's not particularly the computers itself. Basically, my continual point in all of this is that it's the underlying mass populace that's psychic, and the computer is merely the tool that we use to filter through it all.
Right.
So first question.
First question is, over the last several reports, I seem to recall that there is a precipitous drop in the long-term WebBot returns, like the Internet or humans cease to exist for a while. And I'm looking at page 3 and 4 of the latest report, and it looks like there's a building in the data sets that seem to coincide with these 2012 events. And it seems like the view of the WebBot's model space predictions move forward into the future predictions, specifically 2012, and you were seeing a data hole in 2012, and then it comes back online in 2013. Is that still the case? Are you still seeing that data hole?
That's sort of a good description. What you need to understand is that the data hole that we'd perceived in 2003 was centered around 2012. As we got into doing our reports in 2005, the data hole was still in 2012, but we were closer to it. And as now that we're very close to the 2012, the data hole is still there, but it's because we're closer to it, it's ever so much larger. And so our issue at the moment is trying to see around it or through it, so to speak, to get at some of the longer-term data behind it. But basically your description is quite correct. We have a data hole or a hard wall or a hard stop or something that occurs in 2012. Our operating theory at the moment is that there is an emotional wave or an emotional change of great magnitude that occurs to the species as a whole in 2012 that may or may not be accompanied by Internet failure on a mass scale or Internet change on a mass scale such that we can no longer work. In either case, the data hole appears to be a hard stop for us. We think that we're working out some of the parameters on getting some view around it. If we are correct in our operating theory, then once we're through 2012, presumably the emotional impact of whatever it is that's going to occur, one event or many events should be over, and then we could maybe get back to work as usual if the Internet was still functioning.
Yeah, guys, can I jump in for a sec? Because I heard this.
Yeah, sure.
Because I have a question. Geez, hey, it's my show, so I can break in, right? Everybody wish they could. I am hearing this same thing from remote viewers, professionals who are saying when they start projecting and trying to do remote viewing in the 2012 timeframe, they hit a brick wall. They can't see anything.
And
so
it would not surprise me, because basically they're delving into that far end of the psychic technology as well, whereas I aggregate it from vast quantities of people that leak it out unknowingly. They're specifically tuning in on it as basically a highly charged antenna. So this is not surprising at all. I don't know that there's an explanation for it that at this point is much more than speculation. What I do know is that the particulate level of granularity that we used to enjoy within our data sets degraded over time at a steady rate from 2003 until about 2009, and then accelerated that rate, and it has remained steady, and it has accelerated again in early 2011. So the rate of acceleration, the rate of change itself is speeding up. And I suspect it's kind of like rolling downhill strapped to a boulder. As that boulder gets moving, you're going to feel it.
With that, I'll roll out of your way and hand it back to Bill. Thanks, fellas.
Yep, not a problem, Marshall. We have a question from the chat room, Cliff, from a Lawrence Bosek, or Bosek. I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name. And he wants me to ask you about George Yours. I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name.
Yeah.
Okay, Ure. He had a post on Monday that was talking about a possible upcoming seismic event regarding the Canary Islands.
Yeah.
Of La Palma. Do you have any information about it? Any thoughts on that?
Well, there's all kinds of public information that anybody can find out about it. Go and look at what the government's doing, the evacuations, the change in the nature of the island structure. It appears to be very active. There have been hundreds and hundreds of earthquakes in the, maybe even thousands by this point in the last few weeks. This is not surprising. It is predictable that this event will occur as part of the expanding of the planet. The planet is going to expand in direct proportion to the amount of energy that's unleashed into it through the high-energy particles that will be pouring out of the sun, and are pouring out of the sun, and have been pouring out of the sun, and were talked about by Marshall earlier, pouring through the poor people in the market. And those high-energy particles, some portion of them go into the inner part of the Earth that creates new matter there in the reverse of the E equals MC squared equation. And the new matter must force itself out. So, and if you look at these places, La Palma, it was in the process of degrading and sort of slowly stopped. And now the process that started that degradation so many thousands of years ago is speeding back up again. So we can expect it to go. Our issues at the moment are the following. Basically, we know that there's been some serious movement in what we call the entrenched powers, or the powers that were, the elites, or elites as they like to think of themselves. These people are moving around in ways they have not in the past. And this is like got the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. Because when these people go into hidey holes, it's time to pay attention. And there's also been vast quantities of movements of money making particular bets against market activity relative to the immediate future, October. So given that and given the data that we've got, my supposition is that there is an order of probability that I'm not able to put a number on in any meaningful sense, but there is a probability, not a possibility, but a probability that a major earthquake event within the United States, within the continental United States, would also trigger the La Palma event, simply because it's also showing that same kind of pressure from the forces that are causing the expansion, as we're also seeing in some areas of the deep Pacific, including Vanuatu and the Marshall Islands. So the effect there is pretty much the same. I'm in fact waiting that event. Now, does that mean 2,000-foot high waves of water? I dispute that. As a trained oceanographer, I would dispute that you could physically get a 2,000-foot high wall of water to crawl up the Atlantic coast. The continental shelf wouldn't support it. At most, you'd be talking maybe double-size or triple-size ordinary tsunamis, which at most would be on the order of perhaps 200 feet, and it would only go in very shortly before it would lose most of that mass. So the idea of a 2,000-foot high wall of water rolling over a third of the United States is quite bogus. The physical nature of the ocean and how these waves are generated preclude that. But I am indeed very concerned about that sort of event, a La Palma crumbling.
Okay. That kind of actually segues pretty good into the next question and topic that I wanted to discuss, which is kind of hits home, real close to home for me, because
first off, before we bring Cliff in, because what we're going to do in the first hour is, Bill, you're going to be going over Cliff's latest report, Half Past Human, in the first hour. And in the second hour, we're going to be talking about what's not in that report, which is all of the different disinformation that's surrounding Elenin. Now, before we kick the show, I kind of want to make a where are we at assessment, because I'm getting a lot of email from folks, and everyone's been waiting for this period of time when Elenin is in an inferior conjunction, which means it's between us and the sun, and the alignment has got folks concerned. In our video, what we said is that we were concerned about there being a solar event associated with this period of time. Now, what we do have right now is my wife, Yelena, has been following the Russian media on this, and before it is even translated into English, it takes another day or so for that. And what Leonid Elenin is now reporting in Russia is that he is not able to see Comet Elenin in SOHO imagery. But then again, there's a lot of things we don't see in SOHO imagery, so that's neither here nor there. Meanwhile, in terms of solar interaction, I think there's a strong case for the electric universe now, because we have had this long period of solar quiescence. It's like, where's the sunspots, right? And what we have now is sunspot 1302. This thing is so huge that it is visible to the naked eye when people are seeing the sun, like at sunset or sunrise. I'm getting pictures from people, and you're even seeing these naked eye observation photos on spaceweather.com. So it looks like the mainstream sites have finally caught up with us. That's different for a change. Now, the other thing is that we have the CME, this storm. It was a pretty strong storm. Now, yesterday, it was impressive for me. My wife is very supportive of my work, but she's the ultimate skeptic. And it's good. Kind of gives me a check and balance. But yesterday, we're going about, and we live in a coastal area right now. The weather is very pleasant in the 70s, low 70s. And the sun is usually, a nice warm glow on the face. Well, the best way to describe the way the sun has been hitting us here is, particularly yesterday, is it's like, imagine you've gone to the beach and you got a really bad sunburn, and so you suffer through it that night, and the next day you go right back out on the beach without tanning lotion or an umbrella or a shirt or anything, and you just sit in the sun with this really bad sunburn. And that was really, a good way to describe the discomfort and that we were having. It was enough that my wife actually, at one point, took an intentional turn, took a different route so that she could get us, out of the direct sunlight falling on her side of the car. Today, we're having, it's not as pronounced as yesterday, but it's still there. We were out today. And while this is going on, I'm sitting here and I am thinking about the other things we're seeing. Now, there's a lot of reports, and there's new reports coming in today of bolides, blue-green bolides, and they are in these slow, uncertain descents. So it's strange. It's not where they're like objects that are coming in from space that are in a very steep angle of attack, and they just come in like a bullet. Wham! All right? We're seeing this stuff at high altitude, and it's slow. It's meandering, zigzagging back, forth, and then falling. And it's blue-green. Well, we already know we've got space junk falling. We just had this bus-sized observatory that fell out of low Earth orbit. But I think there's a lot more stuff that's falling out of low Earth orbit, and they're not talking about it because, they don't want to talk about it. But these reports are coming in from around the world. They're not being reported in our mainstream media. But again, bolides, these odd fireballs in the sky with this shallow angle of attack and wavering. Well, where does the blue come from? You've got space junk. It is loaded with copper. Burn copper, you get blue-green. Okay? So, and plus whatever other exotic metals that they have in the space junk as it's falling. So I'm seeing all of this stuff, and I'm thinking, all right, at one point it's just like, let's just see what we see, and I'm tired of talking about it. I'm tired of the conjecture and all of the debate, and nobody being able to get clarity on this thing. And, as a researcher, Bill, let me ask you, at some point you go, how many people really give a damn?
I don't know. It's hard to say. There's there's millions of us around the world that are watching this sort of stuff, both with the WebBot reports and all the other information that's coming out, as well as what we talk about. Mm-hmm. But I think there may be literally billions of people around the world that just aren't discussing it, but they're paying attention to it.
Well, I had a moment today where I actually saw an example of that. All right? Out with the wife again. And I think, okay, she wants to go to the farmer's market. I'm going, well, let's see what the sun feels like. People were suffering at the market. The sun was still, it was painful to stand out in the sun. You saw people moving the shade as fast as they could, saw all of the merchants, whatever little shade that they could get out of their awnings, they were under that shade. All right. Nobody wanted to be in the sun because it was still hot on the skin, uncomfortably hot on the skin. And I'm buying some lovely organic tomatoes from this nice little, there's a couple, and this woman is there with her sister and her husband, and they're selling organic stuff from their little farm out in the county. And and she was putting ice on the neck of her sister because her sister was really getting heated up. And this is really odd because why is she putting ice on her neck at 72 degrees out? Yeah, the sun's a little toasty. And it said, well, it's this X-ray storms. And then she turns around and looks at me. Yeah, she said, X-ray storms, this big honking sunspots. We got satellites falling out of the sky. There's all kinds of crap happening, plus meteors. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking to myself, what's this? What am I looking at? This is a 20-something organic farmer from out in the backhoe of the county I live in. Got a nice little farm out there. How would she know about all of these things coming together unless she's following it? And that was when I had a moment of an epiphany as to why there's been so much disinformation. And in the second hour, I'll begin by sharing that epiphany. But with that setup, first off, folks, what I want to say to you is I don't want to come on tonight and speculate or dive into conjecture about what is happening or what's happening. All I want to say is, to me, I don't hear the fat lady singing until the end of November. That's it. I want to see us get through that dust tail, and then after that, I can't see anything else happening. Even with our forecast, assuming Elenin pops up again, but again, early November when we transit the dust tail, I'm still deeply worried about that. And as far as it goes for what's happened so far, frankly, it doesn't match exactly with any of the predictions I've seen from scientists or ourselves or anyone else. But one thing is very clear. In my mind, there is a solar connection between Elenin and Earth, because we're getting slammed with storms from a sun that hasn't had sunspots. 1302 is huge, many times the size of Jupiter, and if this thing merges up with the other two sunspots that are nearby, hell, Katie barred the door. That's it. We're in deep poodoo. So with that, what I am going to do in the first hour is we're going to have a role reversal here. And Bill is going to do the interview in the first hour with our guest Cliff and introduce the WebBot project and get into the report. And then in the second hour, then I'm going to step back in. And I think it's going to be fun. So in the meantime, I'll see you guys out in the chat room. Be nice. Okay, Bill, is yours.
Okay, thank you, Marshall. Ladies and gentlemen, I have the great privilege on the History Channel. His reports have been mentioned. He is the author of the older Alta reports, and he is the author of the current WebBot reports. I present to you the Yow Radio audience, Mr. Cliff High. Cliff, how you doing tonight?
Doing pretty good. Thank you very much.
Excellent. And Cliff and I share one great thing in common. And it's not an understanding of the WebBot report. It's not anything spiritual or anything personal. It is our love of pie. And I love mincemeat pie. How about you, Cliff?
It's not one of my favorites. It's okay. I'm more of a fruit or a squash pie kind of a guy. So my favorite's actually, I think, Marionberry, followed very closely by O. Henry Peach.
Oh, excellent. Excellent.
Yeah, I actually happen to have some O. Henrys down there. They're going to go into a pie tomorrow. So
that sounds good. Now, the WebBot report, for those of you that have never actually seen one in person, Cliff takes and gathers information from across the internet and brings that information in and deciphers it, I guess you could say. And the title of these things is as follows: Asymmetric Language Trend Analysis, Interpretation, and Predictions for 2011-2012. And that sounds like a mouthful, but I'm going to go ahead and let Cliff explain exactly what happens when he prepares these WebBot reports. So, Cliff, take it away and give us a brief explanation of what the heck the WebBot is.
Sure. Let's throw in brief on that. Yeah. I can explain it thoroughly such that everybody would understand it, but it's going to take more than 35 words. So what I'll do is sketch broadly the operation of it. And basically we operate on the theory that all humans are psychic. Most of them don't know it, and that the future can be is continually sending out waves ahead of its manifestation. Those waves are picked up by humans. They don't know they're picking it up, and it causes them to use different words than they would otherwise if absent that particular future impetus. So the future basically impinges on our consciousness in such a way as to change how we use language in our daily interaction. And I can get into the details, but it's not really pertinent. And basically what we do is we read vast quantities of public information. We don't read email. We don't read chat rooms as a rule. Sometimes we stumble into them, but as a rule we don't hunt them out or anything. And we take all this language and coagulate it down into the archetypes that are represented by the words. And then using a proprietary method, we extract from those archetypes